Hey gang, we're looking at the differences between the Sage 5 and the Para 3. Both Spyderco knives, both when you buy them as the base level come with S30V steel. Pretend this is what S30V for the purpose of this video, except when I point out one factor. But yeah, we're going to compare these two patterns and I'll make some sort of suggestions about what are the better parts of each one, and I'll just point out the differences, obviously. So we'll open them up, and there's obvious visual differences. Of course, like, they just look different because they are different knives, obviously. You've got the blade shapes, the leaf-shaped blade, which has a much sort of more spear-like tip on it, as in this angle is closer to this angle, whereas this one has almost a full-on clip point right down from here. They call it a drop point, I think. Belly-wise, very, very similar bellies, like you see there. Very similar indeed. Bit more flat, whereas this is kind of more of a continuous curve. Bit more flat here and then a curve, but really quite similar. Like if you were to trace these two lines, not too dissimilar. Both, when they come with S30V, have a grind that is about the same height. However, the Sage is slightly thinner than the Para 3. It's just a couple of, fractions of a millimeter thinner, like 0.3 millimeters thinner. Maybe, yeah, half a millimeter thinner, or something similar like that. It's not hugely, this isn't hugely thick, I wouldn't say. It's on the thicker side, but this isn't hugely thin either. Neither of these are Spyderco Delicas, Looking at most other knives you get, Steel Wheel Modus, Kaiser T1, they all sort of go, they're pretty comparable, really. Like, none of them are Spyderco Chaparrals, for example. Alright, so, but you are getting a minor degree of thinness here, which does translate into a little bit of a sharper, slicier feeling knife when you actually use it on things that matter for sliciness, like food and things like that. So the cutting performance might be slightly higher in the Sage 5, just very slightly there. Whereas the Para 3 is certainly no slouch, and the S110V, however, you can get to take a bit more of a steep angle. S30V you might find will chip out if you want to put some extreme geometries on it. That is the only thing I can really think of. 110V I think is tough enough to sustain. This is about 15 degrees at the minute. This is still factory, which pleasingly comes at about 18 degrees. Like, it's quite a good steep grind. Well, at least this one was. I'm not sure if that's universal, but Spyderco grinding behind the edge and grinding the steep edges is lovely. I usually have to put one on yourself and take a fair bit of stock off, but what else? But so yeah, they're both going to cut really well, maybe a slight edge in cutting to the Sage 5. Both of them have compression locks, and both of them, when you first get them, are a little tiny bit stiff, but then both of them, as you use them, they loosen up. The compression lock on each is very much not in question. There is not much difference. Mainly, I would wager to guess they're both the same. Like, Spyderco just get them out of the compression lock box and put them on each other's knives and do the cutting out and stuff on the internal of the handle. Very, very similar, and they perform absolutely wonderfully like compression locks do. Compression locks are so great, they're so safe, they're so strong, really, really good locks. So yeah, let's look at the handles here. So the Para 3 actually isn't too much smaller in the handle than the Para 2. And it does have a little bit less pronounced of a parrot's beak, so if you do have a bigger hand, it's still not particularly uncomfortable. Looking at the Sage as well, the Sage has another very, very neutral hand. In fact, if you look at those, those arcs that the hands are going to be moving through. And there again, it's quite a similar pattern. I mean, you go with what works, don't you? Like, it is fairly similar indeed. The forward finger choils, the one on the Spyderco Para 2 is a bit shallower, and because the handles are a little bit thicker, you actually get like less finger depth in there, which is one thing I do notice. Whereas this one, it is quite a deep, almost like it's not quite a half a circle, but it feels like it grabs onto your index finger a bit more. If you have the right size index finger, you won't have a problem with that. But if your finger was a bit on the fatter side, you might feel a little bit pinched. Whereas this one is, the angle of the circle is much less. And geez, I'm really nitpicking here, but people like these comparison videos, and these are the things that are different. The handle scale materials are obviously different in terms of what you're touching. So this is a sheet of carbon fiber, peel ply, and this is just solid G10. The solid G10 is rather, it's rather fine. It's got a bit of scratch to it, as does the carbon fibre. The carbon fibre feels a bit like they're softer hills rather than these, which are sort of closer together and spikier. But neither of them are like that point where they're going to be roughing up your pockets or uncomfortable in your hand at all. So they're both really, really nice materials. Which looks better? Well, that's completely up to you. I actually don't know. I think the carbon fibre looks a bit nicer than the black G10, but I think the blue G10 is quite different and quite pleasant to the eye as well. So yeah, no problems at all with either of the handles. I think this is truly a matter of you might want to see which fits your hand best, but I would suggest they're both going to be pretty much fine. They're nothing too dramatic going on here. Not at all. All right, so the differences mainly come in terms of carry. So when you carry both of these knives, you can have one that is quite deep carry and one that is quite shallow carry. And the one that is quite shallow carry is obviously the Para 3, and then you're going to have this big purple bulb sticking out, and then this kind of large eye-catching lanyard loop as well. They've gone with that from the Para 2. The Para 2 was always, big knife that you could put a big thick lanyard through and all that stuff. They've kept it. I would have loved for them to have done this sort of setup on the Para 3, but then slightly differently as well, because it's really a choice. In my opinion, the flatter, lower down pocket clip makes this a more comfortable knife in hand, whereas the higher up wire clip of this one does sit deeper in your pocket, but these prongs here push against the fat of my hand a little bit during prolonged use. I've used both of these patterns in a prolonged sense, and I've cut like hundreds and hundreds of bits of rope with both of them. You can see the videos already. The S30V video was using this one, but it's the same pattern, and the S110V video was using this exact knife. So I can certainly sort of say that you do notice this in hand, but then you notice this in pocket. So you choose, I guess, I would love to have seen them get rid of this, put a smaller lanyard hole, like the Delica, and then move the clip back a little bit and just ride this up just to here, and just a little bit more depth would have been great, but hey, maybe in the Para 3.5, you just never know. So yeah, that is the really main difference. There's some nominal weight differences. I'll put the weights up on the screen now. When I go like this, the Para feels slightly denser, but really, unless you're a real weight guy, it's probably not going to matter too much to you. In terms of pocket thickness, not too much drastically different there. This is slightly thicker, slightly blockier in general, but neither of them is anything like having, say, a Mannix 2 or anything in your pocket. Even this American Lawman here is a bit sort of boxier and blockier, and this is still a great pocket knife. So they're both really excellent. This is going to come down to one thing. It's going to come down to which look you think is better, and which matters more to you, the deeper carry or perhaps more ergonomic handling. That's all, and unless this really doesn't bother you, or if you use your knives sporadically so you don't build up these long campaigns of getting sore parts from knives. So that's the only real thing. One thing I'll mention is that this is a Taiwanese-made Spyderco, so this is going to be the way this knife is made until they no longer make it. There might be some sprint runs, but I doubt it. I haven't seen any sign of that with the Sage series just yet. This, however, is a US-made Spyderco. And apart from all the benefits of, if you're an American supporting your American makers, all that sort of stuff, the US-made Spydercos do lots of steel experimentation and rotation, which excites me greatly. So the Para 3 pattern is bound to have all sorts of amazing, wonderful steels come through it in its lifetime, just as we see the Para 2 doing. Para 2 has been in all sorts, and this is no doubt going to be in all sorts as well. Maximate version coming in March. How cool is that? It's been in Crewwear already. I have no doubt it'll see LC200N at some point. They'll put it, maybe they'll get some Rex 121 and make some Paras out of that. This is a good sort of strong but slicey blade shape for a steel that extreme. It's the possibilities are here. Whereas this pattern is probably just going to sit on Spyderco's lineup for a little while, and then it'll probably just fade away. Like they'll replace it with something else and it'll be gone. So there's probably more life in this pattern in terms of if you're a bit of a nerd like me for steels, I'd say get to know the Para 3 pattern, because if you're after an EDC knife that has all these awesome steels in it and the Para 2 is a little bit too big for you or a little bit too, just a bit more of a harder use knife that you're not interested in, then I think this one is something worth getting to know, because I prefer it to the native platform. I probably prefer it to the Mannix platform in terms of its just a little bit of extra niceness, Like the Mannix is FRN and plastic covered bolt action lock thing, they're fine, and it's a fine knife in hand, but there's a little bit less soul to it. Whereas this, and that's such a wanky term, I know, but this really does feel like it's got a bit more of that. So if you're looking for a great platform for testing some different steels out on, I think the Para 3 might be the platform to get familiar with at the very least. See if you can get to like it if you don't like it straight away, That's kind of what's happened to me as well. Alright guys, so those are my thoughts on these two knives. As I said, and kind of as I said in this review, this is a really great knife to suggest to someone who probably will only ever buy the one knife. It's got a good enough steel for most people to be like, wow, this knife never goes dull, because most people, they won't really notice if it cuts, they're not so aspy like I am with this sort of stuff. They'll be like, oh, the steel's great. It's really nice and stainless. They're just probably going to use it to cut open boxes and envelopes, so they'll be fine. It's got a good lock that's nice and safe. It's got carbon fiber, which people know is an impressive, oh wow, carbon fiber, and you can be like, yeah, man. The wire clip is good and discreet. It looks like a pen clip. It's great. And the compression lock, good for newer knife users once they've figured it out, because they don't have to put their knife blade they don't have to put their hands in the path of the knife blade at all. This one here I would say is great for the steel nerds like me, because it's going to be a long running platform and you're going to get all sorts of good stuff with it. So yeah, those are my thoughts. Hope you've enjoyed. I'll catch you in the next video. Bye guys.